Good afternoon. I'm Leandro Azevedo, and I'm a Senior Climate Finance Officer at the African Development Bank. We are a development institution that contributes to the economic growth and social progress of our African member states. I'm here this week to participate in the climate investment governing body meetings, but I'm here right now to talk to you a little about the importance of the energy sector to Africa and how concentrated solar power, or CSP, can help. As you may know, the Africa energy sector is significantly underdeveloped. This is true whether we look at energy access, installed capacity, or energy consumption. For example, the African Development Bank estimates that around 645 million people in Africa have no access to electricity. This is more than 50% of the entire African population and almost half of everyone living in the world without electricity. Imagine half of you sat here or watching us online having no access to electricity. It is a scary thought, isn't it? So African countries must significantly expand their power generation capacity if we are ever to achieve universal access. And we must do it at a time where climate change offers an immense opportunity to drive the economic transformation that Africa needs, a transformation that creates jobs, that empowers women, and above all, is climate resilient and low carbon based. Africa has enormous renewable energy potential. If we include solar, for example, this potential is a staggering 10 terawatts. This is 10 times more than the actual installed capacity of the US. So it's clear that Africa must unlock this potential and realize its aspirations. This represents a win-win situation both for developed countries, for investors, but above all, for the African people themselves. Recently, one of the finest actors of our time and climate change activist, its name Leonardo Dicaprio, posted a picture on Instagram of the biggest concentrated solar powered project in the world. As you can see in the picture, the project is so big it can be seen from space. The project is named NOR CSP, is located in Morocco, and once all phases are concluded, it will have a total installed capacity of 2,000 megawatts. This is more than the installed capacity of many countries in Africa today. As a technology, CSP's main strength is its ability to store energy without needing inefficient and expensive batteries. And essentially, that means it can be used during periods of high demand, which allows the power plant to provide flexible and reliable electricity to the grid during periods of high demand. This can be during the night, for example, or even during the day when the sunlight is not sufficient to generate electricity. And CSP is such a promising technology that the International Energy Agency believes that by 2050, 11% of the world's total generated electricity will come from this technology. Unfortunately, the high costs associated with this technology and the lack of utility scale demonstration projects are still deterring investors. This is especially the case in emerging markets where the risk perception is still high and basically acts as a significant barrier that needs to be overcome. But in order to prove the economic and technological viability of this technology, many projects are needed across the globe to ensure technology maturity and to drive through competition in an effort to reduce prices. So the NOR complex is a strong example in terms of projects currently under operations in the world. And by 2018, it will be supplying electricity to 1.1 million Moroccans. And the project also provides one of the best examples of what risk-taking and long-term concessional financing paired with other public and private sources of investments can accomplish. The climate investment funds invested around $400 million in this project. There is also 200 million euros from the African Development Bank and around $3 billion from other investors, both public and private. It also contributed to the flourishing of a local solar industry in Morocco that is helping creating jobs. And in addition, many other lessons are already being drawn. For example, the project will contribute to demonstrate the viability of this technology by establishing track record and help building economies of scale, which will be vital in the future to drive down the costs and to make this technology more competitive. So finding ways to sustainably meet Africa's energy demand and the world's energy demand is a global imperative. And Morocco is fortunately leading the way and showing the world that it works. And if we are all united, we can solve not only the massive problem in Africa with regards to lack of energy, but even power countries that currently rely on fossil fuels. So it is an honor for the African Development Bank, and it's also an honor for the climate investment funds, I'm sure, to be part of this success story. And I just hope this is one of many more ambitious projects to come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leandro. I'd like to open it up for any questions that we might have from the audience. And as we're waiting for the audience to think about that a little bit, I'd want to take your opinion on the more broader, rollout of renewable energy. So I'm South African, and I've been following the renewable energy developments in South Africa a lot. And it's a real success story. Over the last 5 years, we've seen deployments that are driving down the cost of renewables. So is the Climate Investment Fund involved across Africa beyond Morocco? And what are your other flagship projects?
Yes, the Climate Investment Funds are a group of two funds. One of them is the Clean Technology Fund, which basically invests in low-carbon technologies. It was through the Clean Technology Fund that the Climate Investment Funds provided $400 million to this specific project in Morocco. They are also providing funding to other renewable energy projects, mainly in South Africa, but also in Egypt and in Nigeria. Within the climate investment funds, there's also another another program called the Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program, which is basically working with low-income countries in Africa to help them scale up renewable energy in their energy mixes. This is important because most of these countries are still lagging behind in terms of not only of the assets they have to generate electricity and to transmit so that people can actually benefit from these projects, but is also playing a key role at the policy, regulatory and legal framework so that countries get prepared to fast-track the implementation of those projects on the ground, and to also stimulate private investors coming in and contributing to this effort.
We've got a question right here. There's a mic coming your way over there.
Thank you very much for the. I wanted to ask you something related to the cost to finance this kind of projects. So, what kind of strategies do you think are required among all the sectors of the society to close the gap in funding that you need for all these projects? For example, strategies in terms of mobilization of funds, and also if that contemplates a kind of modification in the matrix of generation of electricity as well.
Well, let me try to answer to your question. CSP, compared to other renewable energy technologies, is still very expensive. At the moment, the cost per megawatt of CSP is the double of, for example, solar photovoltaic. Nevertheless, CSP technologies have a big advantage over wind or solar photovoltaic because you can actually store that energy, which you can't do with solar photovoltaic or wind. So imagine during the night, maybe there's considerable wind in your country, and your wind park is generating electricity, but because people are sleeping, no one is really consuming electricity, so this electricity is lost. And that's where CSP has the edge over that technologies. As more projects are built and more competition exists, we believe it will happen with this technology the same it happened with solar photovoltaic, which is prices will go down per megawatt over the future. In terms of financing, I think the key thing here is how we will mobilize private sector. And private sector, their investment decisions depend on one thing. They will want and demand a return for the risk they are taking when considering an investment. Obviously, in addition to that, governments will also play their role. In Africa, this is somehow a problem because the availability of resources are not there. Countries' economies are still lagging behind, and their production capacity does not generate sufficient cash to pay for such expensive technologies. So it's really important and vital that governments create the conditions for private investors to come. One good example I could give you that is happening in Europe nowadays is renewable energy corporations, which is really an effort for people like me and you to come and contribute to the financing of such projects. I believe Africa is still far away from having this type of cooperatives operating on the ground, but it's really a question of willingness and changing the policies and the laws to allow for all this potential to be realized.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question. Let's keep it brief.
I appreciate the fact that you said that obviously there are some countries in Africa that do not have enough cash. And you mentioned Morocco and the wonderful project that you're doing there. So my question to you is two parts. How then do you assist countries such as Zimbabwe, who has got a significant economic issue as far as cash? And then also tell us which of the African countries is the one that is doing well, so that at least we can see what are the better ones and how would you deal with a country such as Zimbabwe?
One of the challenges we see when we look into low-income countries in Africa and middle-income countries in Africa, one thing that it's very different between them is absorption capacity. This basically means that countries, whether due to reasons linked to capacity at the national level, but also in terms of the companies and the businesses that support these kind of investments, are actually ready to engage in this type of investments. So a country like Morocco or South Africa, we see that it's relatively more simple to undertake these complex projects, investing in technologies that do not have that much track record, and do it in a way that they can actually contribute to this track record that we believe it's important to actually drive down the costs and to really improve the risk-return profile of these projects. Zimbabwe is a challenging country. Sorry, it's a challenging country for many reasons, which I won't point out here. But institutions like the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and the Green Climate Fund will be ready to do everything they can to ensure that that transformation can also happen in Zimbabwe. So our commitment remains unchanged for whether it is in Zimbabwe or Somalia or Mali or Morocco or South Africa.
Thank you so very much, Leandro.